In a hidden underground laboratory, far away from prying eyes, a secret experiment was about to change everything. This was not a normal experiment. It was a daring, forbidden attempt to turn ordinary humans into something more than human. Powerful, beast-like warriors. But no one could have guessed how far things would go. Late one stormy night, deep under the surface, the lab was quiet. The only sound was the hum of old machines and the distant echo of dripping water. A heavy, reinforced door stood slightly open, and through the small window of that door, a strange light glowed. As the camera would have panned over rusty tools and worn-out equipment, something unexpected caught the eye. A thin, bony hand with long nails like claws slowly reached out from the darkness. It left a faint trail of dried blood on the cold metal frame. Then, in a barely audible whisper, someone or something spoke. "This experiment is far from over." In that moment, anyone watching would have felt a chill. It was as if the lab itself warned that the secrets inside were dangerous and still active. Before that haunting moment, there was a time when the lab was full of hope and ambition. The story began when a group of scientists, led by a brilliant but troubled man named Dr. Ivanov, started working on what he called Project Bestial. Dr. Ivanov believed that by using a special serum, he could push the limits of human evolution. His plan was simple yet dangerous. Give a select group of subjects a serum that would make them stronger, faster, and more resilient than any normal person. The subjects were not ordinary volunteers. They were prisoners, people who had lost their chance at a normal life. Dr. Ivanov promised them freedom if they could endure the experiment for 30 days. Many of these people had suffered much in their lives, and the promise of a second chance was hard to resist. In the cold, sterile lab, Dr. Ivanov explained his plan to his team. "We are about to witness the next step in human evolution," he said with a mix of excitement and determination. But behind his confident words, there was a silent question. Was it right to play with the very essence of life? The assistants, though skilled and careful, felt uneasy. They had seen too many experiments go wrong. Yet the allure of groundbreaking science kept them from speaking up too loudly. The lab's white walls and blinking instruments seemed to echo the promise of something extraordinary, but also something dangerous. The experiment began quietly. Dr. Ivanov injected the first dose of the serum into the subjects. At first, nothing unusual happened. The prisoners felt a slight warmth where the serum entered their veins. In the days that followed, small changes became noticeable. One of the subjects, a quiet man named Alexei, found that his cuts and bruises healed much faster than before. Another, Dmitry, felt stronger and more alert. The scientists observed these changes with cautious excitement. Data was recorded, measurements taken, and for a short while, hope blossomed in the cold, hard lab. But as the serum took effect, something began to stir within the subjects. At first, it was only a subtle shift in behavior. They started to talk less with one another, their eyes growing distant as if they were seeing things no one else could. Late at night, whispers could be heard from empty rooms, voices speaking in tones that were not entirely human. Dr. Ivanov watched these changes closely. He recorded every detail, every flicker of emotion in the eyes of his subjects. His excitement was mixed with growing concern. He had aimed to create superhumans, warriors who could overcome pain and fear. Instead, it seemed the serum was stirring something deep inside them, a raw, animalistic side that had been dormant for too long. As days turned into weeks, the changes became more pronounced. The subjects started to look different. Their faces, once human and worn by hardship, began to show signs of something primal. Their eyes shone with an almost wild intensity, and their movements became more erratic. It was as if the serum was awakening a beast inside them, a force that could no longer be controlled. Alexei, who had once been timid, now moved with a confidence that bordered on aggression. Dmitry's expressions hardened, and he would sometimes stare at the lab walls with an unfocused gaze, as if he was listening to voices no one else could hear. The assistants whispered among themselves, sharing their fears that the experiment might be spiraling out of control. Dr. Ivanov tried to reassure everyone. "This is just the beginning," he said, though his own voice betrayed a hint of worry. Deep down, he knew that they had unleashed something powerful, a force that could not be easily tamed. The changes were not only physical, they affected the mind, the soul. The subjects began to lose their sense of self, their humanity slowly fading away, replaced by a wild, uncontrollable urge. The lab grew tense. The machines that had once hummed softly now seemed to groan under the weight of the unknown. Every night the subjects would retreat into silent corners, their eyes reflecting a dark inner struggle. The once hopeful experiment had become a battleground between human reason and raw animal instinct. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. The alarms in the lab started to blare, the once ordered corridors filled with chaos. The security systems that were supposed to keep the subjects contained began to fail. It wasn't long before the transformation became complete. The subjects, now more beast than man, broke free of their restraints. In a frenzy of noise and movement, the lab erupted into chaos. The transformed subjects roared, a mix of human cries and animalistic growls, as they pushed through the barriers. The assistants and technicians scrambled for safety, while Dr. Ivanov stood in the middle of it all, his heart pounding with both regret and terror. In a small, secure control room, a few scientists tried to regroup. The lead scientist's hands shook as he looked at the monitors. "We have lost control," he said quietly, his voice heavy with sorrow. One of his assistants pleaded, "What have we done?" But it was too late. The serum had taken over, and the transformed subjects were now beyond human reason. In that very moment, a brave technician made a desperate decision. Believing that there might be a way to reverse the transformation, he suggested using a final dose of a counter serum. Dr. Ivanov, torn between duty and guilt, agreed. "If we can save even one of them, we must try," he said. But even as they prepared the counter serum, the sound of pounding on the door grew louder and louder. The door creaked under the relentless force of the beastly subjects. Every strike sent shivers down the spines of those inside. The team huddled together, their faces pale in the flickering light of emergency bulbs. Dr. Ivanov's voice was barely a whisper. "If this is what we have created, then I must face it, even if it means I, too, become part of the nightmare." The moment of reckoning arrived. With the door on the verge of giving in, the control room fell silent for a few breathless seconds. Then the door burst open. The room was filled with shadows and the indistinct shapes of the transformed beings. In that flash of terror, Dr. Ivanov injected himself with the counter serum, hoping against hope that it might save him, or at least allow him to fight back. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The transformed subjects surged forward with wild energy. Their eyes glowed with a feral light as they moved with inhuman speed. The struggle that followed was both physical and emotional. Dr. Ivanov fought desperately, not just to survive, but to reclaim the humanity that was slipping away. In the midst of the conflict, he could hear a haunting, almost mocking whisper. "We are what you suppress deep within." The battle raged on until silence finally fell over the ruined lab. When the dust settled, only the lead scientist remained, sitting amid the scattered papers and broken glass. His body was trembling, and his face showed hints of a beastly transformation. Sharp eyes, a hardened expression, but he was still human in some small, stubborn way. In the quiet that followed, rescue teams arrived at the now destroyed laboratory. They found no living subjects, only signs of a terrible struggle and mysterious markings on the walls. One broken mirror, covered in smudged blood, had a single chilling message written across it. "This experiment is far from over." The surviving Dr. Ivanov was taken away. In his eyes there was a mix of regret and acceptance. He had played God and unleashed a nightmare he could not control. Even as he was led away, a dark shadow slipped past the cracked window, a figure whose eyes shone with the wild, untamed light of the beast. It moved silently into the night, leaving everyone to wonder if the terror had truly ended